We're just a couple of weeks away now from the first Democratic debate of the 2020 presidential race, and it's going to be a crowded stage with 20 candidates already qualifying for the face-off. And among them is Marianne Williamson, celebrated author, spiritualist, self-help expert, and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. I will say that for many people, this may be the first time that they have seen you or that they've heard you speak or been able to do that, certainly in this venue where you're a political candidate. Considering that, how important has it occurred to you that this first impression is?
It's a big deal, you know. I think, although I realize that a debate is just one moment in time, I think I'd make a mistake to make it too big a deal or too little a deal. Because if you make it too big a deal, what are you going to have? Maybe a minute and a half, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. And I think a campaign is a long-form conversation that you're having with the voters.
If you only have little snippets and chances to have these conversations, and it may not be a long-form conversation unless you really come out of the gate strong.
Yeah.
How do you want voters? How do you want to come across to voters? What if there was one takeaway? What would you want it to be?
I don't think I have. You know, I think that when you're voting for a president, you're voting for who that person is. You're voting for what they believe. You're voting for what their plans are, what their visions, but also the sort of consciousness that they bring to the process. And I think that the debate stage gives people an opportunity to see who you are. You know, the way the human brain works is interesting. There are a lot of different dimensions by which we pick up what our thoughts are about people. So I hope that people see who I am as a woman. People can go to Marianne2020.com. There are plenty of opportunities on the web, etc. People are checking out the candidates, and they will see what I believe. But I think also at the debate, they see how you are. They see how you are with other people. They see how you stand your ground. I hope people see what kind of woman I am.
A lot of candidates are spending time in Iowa. You have actually moved to Des Moines. Tell me about that decision and what you're hoping that means for your chances in Iowa.
You know, when you're a presidential candidate, you're living out of a suitcase. So where you actually have your bed is kind of not that relevant an issue. When you're a presidential candidate, and this is true of all of us, you're spending a lot of time in Iowa and Nevada and South Carolina and New Hampshire. So Iowa's right there in the middle. So it's a lovely city, Des Moines, but it's like not a story where any candidate actually lives.
Okay, so let's dig into some issues now. Okay, the former vice president, this is a big story right now. Joe Biden has changed his view on the Hyde Amendment on abortion funding, with their no federal funding for abortions, with an exception for the life of the mother being endangered, incest, and rape. He's now saying he supports getting rid of the Hyde Amendment. This came after a lot of criticism from other candidates. What do you think of his change? Where are you on this issue?
I certainly think we should repeal the Hyde Amendment. Joe Biden changed his mind. To me, this is the politics that I'm not interested in, that we're all going to talk about what the big deal is. He changed his mind.
Is that genuine, to change your mind from Wednesday to Thursday?
Look, he's running for president. People came up to him and they said, "You're really behind the times on this, Joe. You've already got a problem with women," all of that. And so he changed his mind. You know, I'm a candidate. I want to talk about what Marianne Williamson stands for. And if Joe Biden changed his mind, what that means to the voters will decide what that means to them.
Okay, let's talk about what you stand for. Medicare for all, which you support. Lots of candidates support this. Not all of them, though. How do you propose to pay for it?
You know, this whole thing about how we pay for everything. First of all, there's the zero-sum game and the not zero-sum game. Within the purview of the zero-sum game, what I would do is I would repeal the 2017 tax cut, in which 83 cents of every dollar went to the very richest individuals and corporations. I would put back in the middle-class tax cut. I would close those corporate loopholes. Why were we paying $26 billion to the fossil fuel companies alone in corporate subsidies? The government should be able to negotiate with Big Pharma, and I think that our military budget should reflect our actual legitimate military needs as determined by the military, as opposed to short-term profit maximization for huge defense contractors.
And just real quick, you think that would pay for the
No,
Medicare
I'm not saying that's everything. I'm saying also that I have no problem with a 3% tax on billionaires. I have no problem with asking 2% from those who have $500 million and more. And I think we should factor it in, as we do in our individual lives. Every dollar that you spend actually helping people to live their lives better ups people's productivity and creativity, which ups their earning power, which is actually a contribution and a stimulus to the American economy.
I want to ask you about foreign policy, a key part of being president. We were talking on the show a short time about Russia and what happened here with this near collision between the U.S. and the Russian military ship. Planes as well. We've been seeing these encounters that experts say, look, the more of these you have, the more likelihood you have of something going very, very badly. How would you respond to Russia on this as president?
You know, I heard you talking about it, and I saw a snippet on television. I have to see exactly what happened. I have to think about it. I have to hear what the Secretary of State has to say. I have to hear what the President has to say before I make any comment about specifically my beliefs of what we should do now.
Okay. I mean, this is something that has been going on for hours at this point in time. How important is it for you to stay on top of foreign policy issues like this?
I think I very much stay on top of foreign policy issues. The fact that that's been going on for hours. The President has not spoken about it. The Secretary of State has not spoken about it. You know, I think in a president...
The Defense Secretary has spoken about it.
The Shanahan?
That's right. He said there's going to be military-to-military talks. Is that sufficient?
Well, that's what there should be. I would think that there should be military-to-military talks. And then when I hear what the military-to-military talks are, you know, I think that when you're electing a president, you don't want to think that the president... One of the things that I think about this president, actually, is that this president talks too fast, too frequently. I think that the sobriety of a president should be reflected in a presidential candidacy, that you think deeply before you open your mouth. So I will hear what Shanahan said, and I will hear what Pompeo said, I will hear what Trump said, and then I will not speak just because in any given moment somebody thinks that maybe you should speak. I will speak soberly and reflectively from a deep place within myself.
Marianne Williamson, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. Marianne, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, you are now in a room with some of Iowa's most passionate voters. We are out, along with the Des Moines Register, with a new poll. We have Vice President Joe Biden at the top of the field with 24%, but you're not registering in that poll. How are you going to be able to fix that?
Well, you know, it all has to do with getting out there, being around voters, being able to raise enough money. You know, when you have millions of dollars in your campaign coffers, that's what makes a lot of that stuff happen. But I know what's happening on the ground. I know what's happening when I am talking to people, how my campaign is relating to voters. So this is far earlier in the process than a lot of people seem to realize. If you look at past campaigns, there are a lot of people who have become president of the United States who at this point weren't registering and nobody was even knowing who they were. So when you're in there and you're out there with voters and you see where the energy is, we're doing just fine.
Yeah, it's a long way to go before the first Iowa caucuses next year.
Absolutely.
This is a very crowded field, as we've noted. You are one of 23 candidates. Makes it really challenging for anyone to have their message stand out above the others, especially when there's so many people competing for such a limited amount of space. And you don't have a very long political history like so many, as we're looking at that screen, do. So how are you doing things differently? How are you delivering your message differently?
Well, I don't know if I'm delivering my message differently, but I have a different message. I'm talking about the fact that we have become, rather than a democracy, an aristocracy. The government does more to benefit a small group of Americans rather than millions and millions and millions of us. We have millions of American children who are living in chronic trauma, and their despair is simply normalized. We have a situation where we have an agenda of national security that does not have to do with waging peace. It has to do with endless preparations for war. We have a situation with health care where, although we do talk about how to pay for health care, we're not talking about all the environmental policies, food policies, chemical policies, and so forth, which are making so many of us sick. So there's anybody who hears me knows that I'm talking about things that not everybody is talking about, because I'm having a more deep, a more real, more brutally honest conversation with Americans about what I feel we need to look at. And I think that Americans are far more adult. You know, the political establishment keeps the conversation very shallow and superficial sometimes, and I think the American people are ready to have a far more sophisticated, adult, mature recognition of where we really have gone wrong in this country and what we need to do to make things right.
And one of the conversations that we have been having over the past week, certainly as it relates to Joe Biden, is a woman's right to choose. The former vice president recently reversed in the past few days his position on the Hyde Amendment, which, as you know, bars federal funding for abortions in most cases. What do you make of his change of heart, his reversal?
Excuse me, so much is going on down here. I don't know if you can still hear me, but Joe Biden has a right to change his mind. And the voters have to decide for themselves what that means, that he didn't used to think it was okay, that there was a discriminatory practice towards women. But then on the other hand, you know, people transform. I'm not out here to put down other candidates. I'm out here to present a view of things myself. I am for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment.
We can still hear you. That just goes to show how passionate that state is and how seriously they do take their role. But Marianne, what are you hearing most from voters, particularly in Iowa?
I'm feeling a lot lot of excitement. You know, people in Iowa are they're very aware of the power that they hold. You know, it's not the dog and pony show. It's their vote that's going to determine who wins the Iowa caucus. So they know how powerful they are, and they know how important their vote is. And what I get from voters is that they're listening very, very deeply. And they don't really care who you are, what your title is. They care what your ideas are about America. We have to counter a politics of fear with a politics of love. We have to recognize all the ways that our economic system and our governmental system have swerved from deep democratic values and from deep humanitarian values. And what I hear is a deep listening. When I talk about these things, I'm feeling that people are really listening very deeply. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't still be doing this unless I knew that there was something going on here. You know, last time the political establishment didn't recognize how angry people were. This year, you know what they don't recognize? What they don't recognize this year is how exhausted people are by the fighting and how ready people are for more upliftment and inspiration and love. And that's what I'm delivering.
But to that point, because they are so exhausted, Democrats that is, they are focusing, as polls are showing us more than anything else, on someone who can beat Donald Trump. People in that room, people on the campaign trail, they talk about a whole range of issues, which you've just mentioned, but more often than not, the number one issue is someone who can win in the next election. So why do you think you can beat President Trump?
People who think that what we need is somebody who's tough enough to beat Donald Trump are very naive about the nature of the opponent. Donald Trump has had a long career harnessing fear. I have had a long career inspiring love. What he has done is more than political strategy can counter. What he has done is he has gotten into a piece of the brain inside people, a piece of the psyche inside people, which is a primal power of fear. And the only thing that can override that is the primal power of love. I'm the one who's had a 35-year career harnessing the power of love. Everybody's aware of what he has done, but I'm the only candidate who has some awareness about how he has done it. And so I think that love is the only thing that can override what this man has done. Anybody who thinks that it's just political strategy and getting enough money and mobilizing, all the traditional things that we think. You know what Democrats sometimes don't understand is that the part of the brain that rationally analyzes an issue is not the same part of the brain that decides who to vote for. So if you're just going to give the American people a rational argument, that's not going to defeat Donald Trump. What we need to do is to raise the conversation to greater inspiration, to a greater depth of understanding of what America means, what our history is, what started here in 1776, what has been bequeathed to us, how we have swerved from those things. That is what I've done. That is what I have a long career doing. Politicians have a long career at what goes on in Washington. I have a long career at what goes on inside people. And that's what sometimes the Washington establishment does not understand. That's why they make their mistakes so often in public policy, and that's why also they make big mistakes in not getting reelected, because they're tone deaf to what's going on inside people. And I have an experience there.
All right, Marianne Williamson and the primal power of love. Thanks very much. Good luck out there today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.